The sound came first, a deep percussive thump, thump, thump that wasn't the familiar rhythm of a civilian life flight helicopter. This was heavier, angrier. It was the sound of war invading the sterile peace of the St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital. Rain lashed against the reinforced windows of the emergency bay, driven sideways by a wind that didn't feel natural. It felt manufactured, violent. It felt like rotor wash. For 93 consecutive nights, they thought Clara was just the help, the quiet woman who pushed a mop with a slight, almost imperceptible limp, the one with premature gray streaks in her tightly bound hair and eyes that saw everything but said nothing. They thought she was invisible. They were wrong. Because a force of nature was descending on their rooftop helipad, and it wasn't coming for the hospital's celebrated chief of trauma surgery. It was coming for the janitor. 6 hours earlier, the fluorescent lights of the third-floor corridor hummed a monotonous, soul-crushing tune. Clara pushed her squeaking janitorial cart, the scent of antiseptic and lemon cleaner filling her nostrils. It was a sterile smell, a smell meant to cover up the lingering ghosts of sickness and pain. She knew those ghosts well. They clung to her, too. Her hands, wrapped around the cart's handle, were steady tonight. Some nights they trembled, a phantom memory of a tool vibrating, of cold steel, of pressure needed to stop a life from spilling onto sand. Tonight, they were just the hands of a 48-year-old woman making a living. A door to a private suite swung open, and Dr. Julian Sterling strode out, his tailored scrubs doing little to hide the arrogant swagger in his step. He was a god in this place, a fact he reminded everyone of daily. He held a phone to his ear, laughing at some joke, and didn't see her. He collided with her cart, sending a bottle of glass cleaner shattering on the polished linoleum. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He ended his call, pocketed his phone, and looked down at the mess, then at her. Not at her face, but at the name tag pinned to her gray uniform. Clara. "Well?" he said, his voice dripping with condescending impatience. "Are you going to stare at it or clean it?" "Yes, doctor," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. She knelt, the familiar ache in her right knee, the one with the scars she kept hidden under thick work pants, flaring in protest. She carefully picked up the larger shards of glass, her movements precise, economical. A young nurse, Jessica, scurried up behind him. "Dr. Sterling, the post-op vitals for 304 are stable," Sterling grunted, his eyes still fixed on Clara. "Good. See, Jessica? Competence. It's about doing the job you're assigned, not getting underfoot." He nudged a piece of glass with the toe of his expensive non-slip shoe. Some people seem to struggle with that concept. The insult, delivered for the benefit of his sycophantic audience, landed with a dull thud. Clara didn't look up. She simply continued her work, her face a mask of placid neutrality. Inside, she cataloged it, another entry in a long logbook of indignities. It was part of the uniform, part of the cover. Anonymity was a shield. Silence was armor. Later, during her break in the deserted basement cafeteria, she massaged her knee. The limp was from an IED blast outside of Fallujah. The trembling hands were from the memory of the 3 men she couldn't save that day. The gray hair. That was from everything. She had come here for the quiet, for the predictable, monotonous piece of a job where the only emergencies were spills and overflowing trash cans. She was trying to outrun the noise, but the noise always found you. The shift wore on. The hospital settled into the quiet rhythm of the graveyard hours. Beeping monitors, the distant wail of a siren, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes. Around 3 a.m., a code blue echoed from the PA system. Room 218. Not her floor, but close enough to the service elevator that she heard the commotion. She moved her cart to the side, making way for the crash team. Dr. Sterling was, of course, leading the charge. They worked on the elderly patient, a flurry of activity and shouted commands. Clara stood by the door, ready to clean the aftermath. She saw something they didn't. The patient's dentures, dislodged during intubation, had slipped to the side of his throat. His airway was partially obstructed. It was a small thing, an easy thing to miss in the chaos. She took a hesitant step forward. "Doctor," she said, her voice soft. "Doctor, I think—" Sterling shot her a look of pure venom. "What? What could you possibly have to contribute?" His teeth," she stammered, pointing. "They're blocking." He glanced, saw the dentures, and had a nurse clear them with a sweep of her finger. The patient's oxygen saturation immediately ticked upward. Sterling didn't acknowledge her. He turned to the assembled nurses, a cruel smirk on his face. Let that be a lesson. Even the janitor can get lucky sometimes. He looked directly at her, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You just started here a few months ago, right? Stick to your mop. We'll handle the saving lives part. Laughter, timid but present, rippled through the junior staff. Humiliation burned Clara's cheeks. She retreated, her face impassive, her hands gripping the mop handle until her knuckles were white. She finished her shift in silence, the doctor's words echoing with the hum of the floor polisher. Know your place. She knew her place. It just wasn't the one they thought it was. The storm hit just before dawn. A savage, angry squall that turned the city streets into rivers. The radio on her cart crackled with security updates, a multi-car pileup on the I-5 bridge, a bus involved. The ER was about to become a war zone. Her shift was over, but she didn't leave. Something kept her there, a feeling. The same feeling she'd get before a patrol went sideways. The air tasted of ozone and ozone. She found herself drifting towards the ER, drawn by a force she couldn't name. It was chaos, a sea of bodies, screams, the metallic tang of blood thick in the air. The staff was overwhelmed, running on fumes and adrenaline. Dr. Sterling was in the main trauma bay, a vein throbbing in his temple as he shouted orders, his carefully constructed composure cracking under the pressure. I need a chest tube in Bay 2. Where's the cross-matched blood for the amputee? Somebody get these walking wounded out of my ER. Clara stayed by the wall, a ghost in gray, observing. She wasn't seeing patients, she was triaging. Her mind, dormant for months, slipped back into its old rhythms. GSW to the abdomen, compromised airway, needs immediate intervention. Compound fracture, femur, risk of fat embolism, stabilize and elevate. Head trauma, unresponsive, check for pupillary response. It was automatic, a deeply ingrained litany of survival. Then came the sound. The heavy, gut-punching thump, thump, thump of a military helicopter. It was a UH-60 Black Hawk, flying low and fast, defying the storm as if it were a minor inconvenience. It didn't circle. It descended with brutal purpose onto their rooftop helipad. Sterling looked up, furious at the interruption. Who the hell is that? I didn't authorize another transport. We're at capacity. The doors to the ER burst open. It wasn't paramedics. It was two men, clad in matte black tactical gear, rifles held in a low-ready position. Their faces were grim, their movements economical and deadly serious. Water streamed from their armor. They scanned the room, their eyes missing nothing. This is a military medical evac, one of them yelled, his voice a commander's bark that cut through the chaos. We need the senior trauma surgeon, now. Sterling, his ego momentarily inflated by the summons, strode forward. I'm Dr. Sterling, Chief of Surgery. Who is your patient? That's classified, the soldier snapped. Just clear a bay. He's critical. Another team brought in the gurney. The man on it was older, his face pale and etched with pain. A field dressing, soaked in blood, was strapped to his chest. He wore the tattered remains of a military uniform, a single silver star visible on the collar. A general. They swarmed him into the main trauma bay. Sterling pushed the soldiers back. This is my trauma bay. You will wait outside. The soldier who had spoken first got in his face. We go where he goes. Our medic is en route to meet us. We're not leaving him. Your medic has no jurisdiction here, Sterling spat, turning his attention to the general. He started barking orders, but his hands were shaking. The pressure of the VIP patient, combined with the chaos, was getting to him. He was out of his depth. The general's vitals, displayed on the monitor, began to plummet. A frantic alarm started to shriek. He's crashing! BP is 60 over palp! He's bradying down! A nurse shouted. Clara moved. It wasn't a conscious decision. Her body just took over. She pushed through the throng of nurses, her limp gone, replaced by a stride of pure purpose. Stop compressions, she said. Her voice was different. Gone was the whisper. This was a voice forged in firefights and field hospitals, a voice that carried absolute authority. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the panic like a surgeon's scalpel. Everyone stopped. They turned to stare at the janitor. Sterling's face contorted with rage. I told you to get out! Security! Clara ignored him. Her eyes were locked on the monitor, then on the patient. She pointed to the general's neck. Look, tracheal deviation to the right, jugular vein distension, no breath sounds on the left side. She placed a hand on his chest. Subcutaneous emphysema. It's a tension pneumothorax. He's got less than a minute. The two soldiers stared at her, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock, then to dawning recognition. She's right, one of them murmured. Sterling was sputtering. That's a ridiculous diagnosis. He has a chest wound. He needs a chest tube, not... There's no time for a tube, doctor, Clara cut him off, her voice like ice. He needs a needle decompression, now. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a crash cart. Ew. She moved towards it with a speed that defied her age and her limp. She snatched a 14-gauge angiocath and 2 antiseptic swabs. Somebody stop her, Sterling shrieked, finally finding his voice. She's going to kill him. One of the soldiers put a hand on Sterling's chest, stopping him cold. Let her work. Clara was at the general's side. Her hands, which had trembled just hours before, were now impossibly steady. She swabbed the skin with practiced efficiency. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Tell me when you're ready to breathe for him, she said to a stunned respiratory therapist. She positioned the needle, a whisper of prayer for the ones you can't save, a steady hand for the one you can. The mantra from her past surfaced, unbidden. She pushed the needle in through skin, fat, and muscle until she felt the distinct pop as it entered the pleural space. A loud hiss of escaping air filled the suddenly silent room. On the monitor, the general's blood pressure began to climb. His heart rate stabilized. The terrifying alarm ceased its shriek. A collective gasp went through the room. Dr. Sterling looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Just then, the doors to the ER flew open again. A third soldier, this one wearing a flight helmet pushed back on his head, ran in. He was the flight medic. Sorry for the delay, sir. Had to secure the LZ, he yelled to his team leader. He stopped, taking in the scene. The stabilized general, the stunned hospital staff, and the janitor holding a catheter in the patient's chest. His eyes widened. He looked from the janitor to his team leader, a look of disbelief on his face. The team leader broke the silence. He looked past Dr. Sterling, his gaze fixed solely on Clara. His voice, now filled with a reverence that bordered on awe, echoed through the trauma bay. Angel 6, he said, the name a code, a legend. We've been trying to raise you on comms. We were told you were in the city. Clara looked up, her eyes meeting his. For the first time that night, the mask of the meek janitor fell away completely, revealing the soldier beneath. My radio's out for repairs, she said, her voice calm and even. Good to see you, Sergeant. Sterling's jaw was on the floor. Angel 6? What is this? Who is she? The sergeant turned his head slowly, fixing Sterling with a glare that could melt steel. She, he said, his voice dripping with contempt, is Lieutenant Colonel Clara Vance, call sign Angel 6. She was the senior combat medic for the Joint Special Operations Command Task Force in the Stan. She didn't just write the book on battlefield trauma care, Doctor. The book is dedicated to her. He gestured around the ER. Every single field medic in our branch learns the Vance protocol for mass casualty events. The needle decompression technique she just used, she perfected it under fire in the Korengal Valley. She's credited with over 200 confirmed saves in contested zones. She has a silver star, 2 bronze stars, and a chest full of purple hearts. The sergeant took a step closer to the now pale doctor. You are standing in the presence of a living legend, and you told her to stick to her mop. The silence in the ER was absolute, broken only by the steady, life-affirming beep of the general's heart monitor. Jessica, the young nurse who had snickered earlier, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The general on the gurney stirred. His eyes fluttered open, hazy with pain but lucid. They found Clara. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He tried to speak, his voice a ragged whisper. Clara, Vance, Coast Province, you pulled my pilot out of a burning crash. Clara gave him a small, sad smile. Rest easy, General. We'll get you sorted. The hospital administrator, a portly man named Henderson, finally arrived, drawn by the commotion. He saw the soldiers, the stabilized general, and the furious look on the sergeant's face. What in God's name is going on here? Henderson demanded. The sergeant didn't hesitate. What's going on, sir, is that your chief of surgery's arrogance and incompetence nearly cost General Marcus Thorne his life. He misdiagnosed a critical injury and was actively trying to prevent the most qualified person in this entire city from saving him. He pointed a thumb at Sterling. I want his name. There will be a full inquiry. Sterling turned a shade of gray Clara had previously only seen on corpses. Now, wait a minute. I'm in charge here. Not anymore, you're not, Henderson snapped, the political calculus of the situation clicking into place with terrifying speed. A decorated general nearly dying in his hospital was a disaster, having him saved by a decorated war hero who his staff had been abusing. That was a career-ending catastrophe for Sterling and a potential PR nightmare for the hospital. He turned to two burly security guards. Escort Dr. Sterling to my office. He's on administrative leave, effective immediately. As the guards took a protesting Sterling by the arms, the sergeant turned back to Clara. His entire demeanor softened. Ma'am, it's an honor. He stepped back and brought his hand up in a crisp, perfect salute. The other two soldiers immediately followed suit. In the middle of the chaotic emergency room, surrounded by the wreckage of the night, 3 elite Special Forces operators stood at attention, saluting the janitor. The nurses, the orderlies, the other doctors, they all just stared. They were looking at the same quiet woman they had ignored and mocked for months, but they weren't seeing her anymore. They were seeing the hero she had been all along. Clara watched Sterling being led away, her expression unreadable. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet, weary sense of peace. The noise was back, but this time she had met it on her own terms. She looked at the sergeant, holding his salute. With her free hand, she gave a slight, acknowledging nod, the gesture of a commander accepting the respect of her soldiers. Her place, it turned out, was right where she was needed most.